The night Abraham decided to stop praying, heaven noticed before morning did. He had been a good man once. He knew this the way you know the shape of a room you grew up in without having to look. He had prayed 5 times a day for 30 years. He had given from what little he had. He had buried his father with his own hands, then his mother 3 years later, then his wife in the spring that broke him completely. It was the wife that did it. Her name had been Mary, and she had been the kind of woman who made the world feel arranged correctly, like furniture placed with care, like a sentence that ends exactly where it should. When she died of fever in 4 days, Abraham did not weep at the burial. He was too busy watching the grave diggers and thinking, with a clarity that frightened him, God did not have to do this. He went home. He sat down. He did not get up for prayer that evening. That was 6 months ago. Now he sat in the same chair, in the same house, in the same darkness he had been cultivating like a garden. The lamp had gone out an hour ago and he hadn't bothered to relight it. Outside, the city hummed its nighttime sounds, a donkey somewhere, the call of an owl, the distant voice of someone reciting scripture in a house down the lane. That voice made him angry in a way he couldn't fully explain. It seemed to be aimed at him personally. He pulled his cloak tighter and closed his eyes. He did not sleep. He hadn't truly slept in weeks, just drifted in and out of a gray, weightless place that offered neither rest nor dreams. He lay in the dark and felt the specific, terrible loneliness of a man who has decided the universe doesn't care about him and has found, to his horror, that the decision brings no relief at all. If you were listening, he thought, not quite a prayer, not quite an accusation, you would not have taken her. The room was silent. Then it was not. He didn't hear a door open. He didn't hear footsteps. He was simply aware, with the sudden certainty of cold water, that he was no longer alone. He opened his eyes. There were 2 of them, standing near the far wall where the shadows were deepest. They were not large, or perhaps they were, and his mind was refusing to process the full dimensions of them. They looked, at first, almost like men. 2 figures in the darkness. But the darkness around them was behaving incorrectly, not gathering, as darkness should, but retreating, pulling back from them the way water pulls back from hot stone. Abraham did not scream. He discovered, in that moment, that he was too tired to scream. "Are you going to kill me?" he asked. His voice came out steadier than he deserved. "No," said the nearer one. The voice was unlike anything he had a word for, not loud, not soft, not quite sound at all, but somehow present in the center of his chest, the way a bell is present after it has been struck. "Then what do you want?" The 2 figures looked at each other. It was a very human gesture, and somehow that made it stranger. "We were sent," the second one said, "because of a prayer." Abraham laughed a short, broken sound. "I haven't prayed in 6 months. "We know," said the first. "We were sent because of the last one." Abraham went still. He remembered it. Of course he remembered it. The morning Mary's fever had spiked past reason, past the herbs, past the doctor's quiet shrug of helplessness. He had knelt on the cold floor beside her bed and pressed his forehead to the ground and said not the formal words, not the arranged language of ritual, but something ragged and private and real: "Please. I will give anything. Please don't take her from me. Please. God had taken her anyway. That prayer, Abraham said, and his voice had changed, was not answered. It was heard, said the first figure. That is not the same thing. No, it agreed, without apology. It is not. The honesty of this stopped him. He had expected comfort. He had expected the soft architecture of consolation. She is in a better place, there is a plan, your pain has meaning. He had braced for it the way you brace for something you intend to refuse. Instead he had been given a plain fact, offered without decoration. He looked at them more carefully. Why are you here? What does it mean that I was heard? The second figure shifted, not walked, exactly, but moved the way a shadow moves when the light source changes. It came a little closer. He noticed it carried something, though he couldn't have said what, a sense of weight, of purpose, like a messenger at the end of a very long journey. There is a man 3 streets from here, it said. His name is Khalid. He makes rope for a living. He has a daughter who has been ill for 2 weeks and a debt he cannot pay, and he has been sitting in the dark for the last hour telling himself that no one in the world knows his name. Abraham stared at it. Why are you telling me this? Because you know what it is to sit in the dark telling yourself that. The room was very quiet. And because, the first one added, he prayed tonight. And prayers require answers. Sometimes God answers through his own hand. And sometimes a pause, brief and deliberate, he answers through the hands he has already placed in the world. Abraham sat with this for a long time. I am not a good man anymore, he finally said. I told you. I haven't prayed. I am angry. I am. You are a man whose wife died, the nearer figure said. That is all you are right now. It is enough. It does not disqualify you. Something cracked open in Abraham's chest at that. Not healed, nothing healed in a single night. But opened. A window where there had been only wall. He looked toward the door. 3 streets, he said. East. The house with the blue door that needs painting. He looked back at the 2 figures. He wanted to ask 10,000 questions about Mary, about what comes after, about whether his anger had been heard too and whether it had been held against him. He wanted to ask what they were, exactly, and whether he had lost his mind entirely. Instead he asked the only question that felt urgent, will she be alright, the rope maker's daughter? The 2 figures looked at each other again. That, said the first one, with something in its voice that might, in a human, have been called gentleness, is not yet written. Abraham stood up. It took effort. 6 months of sitting had stiffened something in him that went deeper than muscle. He found his cloak. He found his lamp and lit it. He stood at the door for a moment with his hand on the latch, and turned back to ask one more thing. The room was empty. The darkness was just darkness again, ordinary, unlit, making no claims. If not for the fact that he could still feel that bell-tone resonance somewhere behind his ribs, he might have convinced himself he had dreamed it. He opened the door. The night air met him, cool and full of stars. He walked east. He found the blue door easily. It did need painting. He knocked, not knowing what he would say, and when a hollow-eyed man opened the door and and stared at him with the specific suspicion of someone who has stopped expecting good things. Abraham said the only honest thing he had, "I don't know you. But I think you have been having a very hard time. And I have some money I am not using, and I know a doctor who owes me a favor." So he held up his lamp. "May I come in?" Khalid the rope maker looked at this stranger on his doorstep for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. Later, much later, after the doctor had come and the fever had broken and Khalid had wept with relief in a way that Abraham recognized from the inside, Abraham sat in the rope maker's small courtyard under a sky full of stars and felt, for the first time in 6 months, that the world was not sealed against him. He did not feel that Mary's death had been explained. He did not feel that his anger had been wrong. He felt something quieter and more durable than either of those things, that he had been seen in his darkness. That the seeing had not required him to be anything other than broken. And that somehow, inexplicably, being broken had made him exactly the right person to knock on a stranger's door at midnight. He tilted his face up to the stars and said nothing for a long time. Then, slowly, he pressed his forehead to the cobblestones of the courtyard floor. He prayed. Not the formal words, not yet, not quite. Just his own ragged, honest voice again, the same one that had begged on a cold floor beside a bed that couldn't save her. "I am still angry," he said. "I want you to know that. But I am also here. And I think maybe that is where you wanted me." The stars did not move. The night said nothing back, but somewhere above the courtyard, in the space between one breath and the next, something that had been waiting a long time finally, quietly, closed.